Oh my God, I had to get photos for my renewal form, you know. And I just went,
the guns.
yeah, and got them taken last night and never realised that sure two black eyes like. And I just looked at the pictures. I just like hopped into the booth, got the pictures taken, didn't check them.
Yeah.
Just like the roughest looking pictures ever.
Would you not have loads in your OnlyFans anyway, though? No?
Not in portrait. There's Connor Smith.
When is the license up? Are they all the same time or different?
No. It's like one every year.
That's so much hassle. That's a disaster.
It's actually, I don't know, keeps you on your toes. Like, yeah, I think I have one every year. There might be 1 year where I have two, but
Does it start? Eric said in morning there, right? There's a certain time of year in Ireland where it gets cold enough and dark enough that it's just morning all day until the evening.
yeah. And then you're like, geez, that light is going. It never really gets that bright, like. I'd love to know where everyone is tuning in from. If you could let us know. Obviously, there's everyone who's written in so far is a regular commenter. It would be great if you're like signing in from Timbuktu, Barcelona, Daniel Clemens. I would have never had you down for a Spaniard. Yes.
No way.
Geez, that's mad, isn't it? I assume people's names or people are from certain places because of their name.
Daniel Clemens, I would have said.
Daniel's been commenting on these live streams for a long time, and I never would have said the Basque region. Barcelona is Basque, isn't it?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, isn't it?
I don't. No. It's in the East Coast.
Oh, okay.
Spain.
Okay. Sorry, I'm wrong.
Lovely city.
Never been there.
Very nice.
Oh, Daniel Clemens is actually German, but he's in Barcelona.
What the fuck?
Oh, sorry, it's Catalonia. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Connor Smith asks a great question.
It's very hard to replicate the adrenaline of that, you see. So the big thing with
will we read the question first?
Oh, you were talking about Connor Smith's question.
Connor Smith says, since I'm here early enough, I'll ask a useless question. I don't think it's useless at all. Reaction and hand-eye coordination training for driving stroke rally. Do you want to go first? Oh, you're eating. So the first thing is both reaction and hand-eye coordination can be trained. They're very, very trainable. You'll see most athletes in their different sports doing most athletes, if they're doing good kind of skill preparation work, will do a lot of hand-eye coordination work. They'll do a lot of reaction time work. So examples of this would be, you'll see the Formula One drivers, and they'll have like two tennis balls in their hand. They'll get somebody to drop the tennis ball at random intervals. They might even be doing it with their eyes closed. And as the person drops, they'll shout and they'll open their eyes and try and catch the tennis ball as they're going. You can also use things like rebound balls, which would be like a tennis ball with loads of little weird lumps in it. A lot of tennis players or racket sports players will stand in front of a wall and they'll bounce that ball off the wall. The wall has a different bounce pattern each time because of the irregularity of the bumps. And then you practice both your reaction time, because you're having to react to that visual stimulus of it coming back, but also your hand-eye coordination. And this goes the same for rugby players, soccer players, everything where you're interacting with a ball or a shuttle or whatever it is. Very, very trainable trait. Now, the specificity of that training is something I kind of call into account, because I don't necessarily know, do you need to be in a suit, like in a what we might call an ecologically valid environment? So a way you might think about training reaction time would be a rally driver being in a rally simulator, and they're in a rally simulator and they're having to react to things that might be coming at them faster than they come at them in real life. So you can run a rally simulator where your average speed will be bumped up by 15% or 20%, and then your reactions will have to be faster as you're cornering or things like that. Or you might have an artificially reactive circuit where you never have the same bend coming at you twice. those kind of areas are very trainable, but I don't know, does it need to be that ecologically valid or that specific? Because I think those reaction times, like with reaction time, what you're doing basically is changing the makeup of your nerve, and you're changing the makeup of your brainstem, where your nerve will increase myelination along it. And there's some other physiological things that will happen that will basically allow you to get a message from your brain out to a motor unit faster. Like that's what's happening with reaction time. You also have increased reaction time with your hearing and with your eyes and things along those lines. So I don't think it needs to be super specific, or most of the research wouldn't say it has to be super specific. But so you could do your normal reaction time drills, not necessarily specific to rallying.
The interesting thing about rallying, and motorsports is the adrenaline, that is happening and the kind of state of mind you're in. So, like, I know other sports have a lot of adrenaline. If you're a big game in American football, or if you're in the fucking World Cup final in soccer or something, you're obviously going to have a lot of adrenaline. But there's a huge danger element involved with rallying. So these do change like the hormonal process and stuff. So it really does impact how fast you're reacting. You'd have a lot more adrenaline. You'd probably tend towards a lot more mouth breathing if you weren't consciously aware of it. You'd end up with things like reducing peripheral vision, and you're kind of narrowing your focus, which might actually be useful for rallying. So I'd say the big thing, obviously doing any of the stuff will be useful. Any kind of hand-eye coordination stuff would be useful, but I would say in this case, the sports specificity is the big thing, because the funny thing about the motorsports and bicycles and things like that is that you're interacting with a machine that has like a delayed time point from when your reaction happens. So it's there's different layers of the nervous system. When if I want to hit Dara in the face now before he gets away, there's certain things that Dara has to process, and there's certain slots and certain gateways through his nervous system that has to go through. Or if I do hit him, and then the time it takes for him to feel it and then to react, there's a lot of those things that happen. And if you kind of think about your car as another layer of that nervous system, so I would wonder if like necessarily increasing your hand-eye coordination or your reaction times outside in a training environment would improve as much as just doing more driving, if at all possible. Obviously rallying is very expensive and that's hard, but there's another layer, like it's like an extension of you as well, and another layer of that system, and then you've a further layer outside of that when you have like gravel, tarmac, snow, water, any combination of these things. If you spend a lot of time on one of them, it obviously massively changes the reaction time on, say, if you spend your whole life driving gravel, but then if you go to a wet tarmac or something like that,
It's actually a really interesting point of like your your visual reaction time is probably very sharp already, Would you notice that much of a difference? Whereas you could alter something in your car that would say give you more physical feedback from the steering wheel. Like a loose steering linkage changes your reaction time in rally driving or in anything. Any of those small things of feedback. Was it Senna used to talk about him having the most gifted ass in the world because he could feel everything in the car through his ass.
Oh, okay.
Like those feedback loops are highly trainable.
Then you also have your skill development on top of that, so like your reactions might be good, but your ability to drive might be terrible. So you might be reacting too early, you might be reacting too late, but it doesn't necessarily line up with your ability to react at the correct timing. So your timing comes into it a whole lot then, so there's a lot of variables involved in that. Now, I know you see loads of like the Formula 1 drivers and stuff doing those stupid ball drills and stuff, and the boxing things, where you touch the lights and things. And I don't think there's any, I think they're probably beneficial. But I'd love to see someone do it'll be impossible to do, but some kind of interventionist thing.
See, that's the thing. Those F1 drivers or those professional drivers are in cars. They're already in cars as long as they can be in cars. As long as their physique will allow them to be there. It's not like they can add 20 hours of extra driving on per week. Like they'll literally break down because of that. So then you see those super niche drills. Timothy Saltmarsh is from Louisiana. Daniel Clemens is moving to Madrid. Geez, Daniel, you're all over the place. All over the place. Okay.
Dr. Demographics is working from home, living the dream in finance in Dublin. I'm going to say...
Go on.
Not living the dream in finance in Dublin. I'm just going to say that now. I'm just getting a tone from this.
Geez, something happens when I approach Dublin. My whole demeanor just changes. It's like as I get closer to the pale, it's just like
It's once you get on. Is it what's before the M50? Is that the M7 or what's that?
The M8. That I know that piece of road where it's 100 kilometers an hour.
And you're in Dublin basically.
Yeah.
It's 3 lanes.
Yeah, by the Louis Fitzgerald Hotel.
For me, that's where it starts getting.
That's where it just gets right up there. For
like,
us country lads, like that's not a.
Yeah.
Palm starts sweating.
Yeah. Start locking the doors. Start looking at people funny. You know.
Start driving super aggressively.
Yeah, really aggressively. Everyone's wearing like caps, but they're not over their ears, and they're not Kerry Farmers. Like,
yes,
what's that
yeah.
Everyone's wearing Doc Martens.
The fisherman hats that just go like this.
They're wearing Doc Martens, but they're not doing any work.
Yeah.
I just don't understand. Like,
yeah.
Everyone's pockets in their pants now, but they're not keeping anything nails, and they're like,
no.
You know,
combats have come massively back into fashion.
I bet there's not one combat out there with a Stanley in their pocket or an open plate. I bet there's not one.
Timothy. So Erico Oliveira, who's tuning in from Brazil, says,
Christ.
Did you catch the video of the kid who dropped 250 kilos of weight while pulling sumo? Was expecting I saw it.
I actually didn't watch it.
It's grim.
Did he lose toes?
His foot is mangled. I watched it by accident. You know, when you're just kind of like scrolling through and you're like, oh my God. Oh, why did I just watch that?
I saw a thumbnail for it.
Yeah.
And it was like, kid gets his foot amputated by sumo deadlifting. And I was like, I just don't need to see this. It was bound to happen eventually. To someone.
Kaiser 306 says, do you recommend packing your shoulders and using a slight arch to reduce the risk of injury on the bench press with leg drive, or do you just prefer flat back for anybody not competing? I prefer, so for almost every athlete I have, unless you're a powerlifter who's kind of like 6 weeks out from a comp, what I like is back flat, active back and midline. So although my back might be flat, it's not 100% flat. It's not kind of like a sack of potatoes laid down on the bench. There is a slight arch because my back is active. But more importantly to any of that, I like the hips and legs to be active all the time. So for like rugby players or rowers or anything who have close grip bench press in their program, their back is almost completely flat on the bench, although it's slightly active. But more importantly, their legs and hips are still working hard. So they have nice flat positions, but they're very, very solid positions. Almost nobody does a super big arch with me, to be honest. Even the competitive powerlifters don't do big arches. But around 6 or 8 weeks out from comp, they'll start to kind of bring that arch in a bit more.
So, it's funny, like the reducing injury risk and like it's really funny at the moment. So there's a lot of people on the internet who have taken the opinion, primarily on Instagram, but on the YouTube comments as well, where you can't say something reduces your risk of injury because you don't have empirical evidence, And I think it's very funny. It's like we've gotten to a place now where we can't use logical reasoning, anecdotal evidence, and plenty of personal experience to make rational decisions as coaches anymore because we don't have any empirical evidence. And it's so funny. Like 10 years ago, there was this huge thing where it was foam rollers didn't do anything. There's no empirical evidence. There's no clinical data. There's nothing in the literature to suggest that foam rollers do anything just because no one had done any of it. And you're saying you can't do anything with that. Mm-hmm. And there's no point using foam rollers or soft tissue work because it's stupid. Now, recently, there's been a lot of evidence that soft tissue work does improve range of motion. But now the big thing, the goalposts have moved and it's they only do it temporarily. But that's so fucking stupid. Like everything does it temporarily. Training, everything you do in training is temporarily. Everything regresses back to where it wants to be. Aerobic regresses, strength regresses, speed and strength regresses, muscle mass regresses, coordination regresses, skill development regresses. Why would mobility and flexibility be held to a different kind of standard where you would have to say it didn't last forever? My new range of motion from one foam rolling session didn't last forever, so therefore it's null and void. But that's so fucking stupid.
Also, medical and health markers regress.
Yeah, everything regresses.
Like you can be super healthy with your diet.
Yeah.
And then stop doing it and suddenly you're less healthy than you were before.
Yeah.
Everything. It's the law, like it's the second law of thermodynamics that everything regresses to entropy.
But the second part of this is that like recently someone commented on one of our videos and we were talking about an older video from a couple of months ago. And we were talking about the difference we see with the old school elite FDS west side barbell low bar squatting, where people would sit back a lot. You'd see a 90-degree shin angle for most of the lifter as much as possible. See a lot of external rotation and they would sit back very wide. Squatting stance would be well outside shoulder width, and this would have been involved in, equipped and unequipped lifting. And you'd see lifters sit down and back a lot. And this is typically quite hard on your hips, and you'll see a lot of people experiencing hip discomfort from it, especially if you're not of the larger build. And someone commented saying, "It's big fan of your stuff, guys, but very disappointed to see you preaching this this kind of statements." Because we were saying you see less hip issues with people when they squat high bar with a moderate stance or low bar with a moderate stance compared to the old school style sitting back powerlifting style squat, which we see less of, I think, as the years go by. And it's so stupid to say that. Of course we can say that. If I give Dara a phone, are you more or less likely to make a phone call now that you have a phone?
I'd say I'm more likely if I have a phone.
So if you are only squatting or not squatting, if you only squat, are you more or less likely to hurt your knees?
I'd say I'm more likely to get a squat-related injury if I'm squatting.
Yeah, it's
than
crazy,
if I'm
isn't it? It's mental. So why can't we say if you change the way you're squatting, you're more likely to have more issue, more inflammation, more potential sites of pain with joints and ligaments that are taking more of the load more consistently at heavier weights? Why can't you say that? Why can't you say it anymore? That's
I think you
stupid.
can say that.
It's fucking stupid, like, for people. And it's I just see it all the time, and things. And the big thing is like back flexion and stuff, which I think it is quite interesting. But who's going teaching people to deadlift with huge amounts of thoracic extension? I don't know anyone good coach who does that. And any of the good powerlifters that we've ever asked or talked about it say they don't intend to do it. They've never tried to do it, and they didn't teach themselves to get that. Like Shane Hunt is an example of that. He said it's not something he would teach people to do. It's not something he intends to do himself or aims for. That's just I don't know if that's a good question, but it's just something I've been thinking about recently.
On that point, I feel that issue has arisen in the last 5, 6, or 7 years because of the fact that everyone went everyone went research based.
Yeah.
And research based goes, but a lot of people went research based without an ability to read research. So then you had that's the main issue here, is that so you'll see somebody will look at a foam roller study, and there's foam roller studies where you could take class action lawsuits against people because a company will claim foam rollers reduce the risk of injury. You'll have a paper reducing the risk of injury. To prove that as a provable point is almost impossible, because it's almost impossible to say the risk of injury, to equate the risk of injury to something. So they do it with Premiership football clubs. They'll have one club foam rolling, one club not foam rolling. They'll have representative data from 2 or 3 years beforehand. They'll equate a risk of injury, and then they'll say their risk of injury decreased or increased because of that. But those studies are very, very, very difficult, and they don't have a massive amount of power behind them. So when you have something like barefoot running shoes, and this is the classic case of this, where you had a big class action lawsuit, the barefoot running shoe, this company in particular claimed the barefoot running shoe will reduce your risk of injury. Now, it's an unfortunate case that the barefoot running shoe and how they implemented barefoot running increased the risk of injury for most people who tried it. They then tried to do a study that showed it decreasing the risk decreasing the risk of injury. And obviously the study couldn't show it because they couldn't equate the risk of injury, or they couldn't have a properly randomized and paired match study. So that in that case, companies lose tens of millions of dollars because of those claims. And now people are like, oh, how can you say that? How can you say that's a risk of injury? Because you bend your back? Show me the data behind that. The risk of injury stuff is just, everyone understands what good movement patterns are.
Yeah.
And everyone understands what dangerous is. But when you get people reading through literature that's already very, very difficult to design and document and do all that, who now don't have the skills to properly read through it, I think that's where the big issue.
The big thing as well, and I think people come at this then from the point of view where, or this is what they're saying, they're coming at it rather than just admitting that they like being contrarians. They're coming at this point where they're saying that people are making people afraid of exercise.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you know anyone who's gone, geez, I don't do deadlifts now because I saw a Squat University Instagram and I just don't want to risk it. I don't.
I've come across some people some people who are sports people who say I don't do deadlifts because they're too dangerous, aren't they?
Yeah, that's because of Robert Oberst and Joe Rogan. That one video influenced so many people, and then on that hand, then that is ridiculous, where it's like you are fear mongering. So I will give them that and that side of things.
Yeah,
where that is stupid, but at the same time, you don't take that all the way to saying, okay, deadlifts aren't dangerous. They're not a risky exercise compared to anything else. they're very valuable exercise for a lot of sports, but you don't take that all the way to saying you round your back, no problem, it's cool, like, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
I think what'll really tell is probably in the next decade we'll see more research and more directed research on this. One of the funny things as well is that I think a lot of people who were never involved in kind of the academic side of maybe, sciences in terms of like maybe biochemistry or sports science or physiology, a lot of times people don't realize that some of the people doing the research mightn't always be the most, that's the right word I'm looking for, the best person to do the research. And a lot of times they're doing the research because they have to do it for their masters.
Or they have to do it because they have to publish 3 papers a year. They have
to publish 3 papers a year or something,
Like a lot of the time,
because I don't want to talk shit on people doing research because it's really valuable.
100%.
But
what you have to consider about a lot of that research as well is like a lot of studies. So say Owen does a study today and he looks at someone eating protein or an intake of protein directly after exercise, and he'll look at how much their strength numbers increased versus how much the non-protein group increased. He'll look at their lean tissue mass versus the non-protein group's lean tissue mass. He might look at 2 or 3 other things. That's one study, right? And Owen does that one study, and he might do it in conjunction with 3 other PhD students or 3 other PhDs, right? Owen will then say, okay, my main paper is protein intake versus strength outcomes. That's the paper, that's the study that was done, that's what everyone was recruited for. Now, the second person in his research group says, okay, I'm going to take their DEXA scans, and I'm going to say protein intake following resistance training increased protein intake following resistance training, does it increase lean tissue mass? And then we have a second paper. Now we have a third paper that will look at exercise intervention versus happiness, because Owen might have done mental well-being, because Owen might have done a questionnaire before and after their training sessions, and now it has nothing to do with protein intake, nothing to do with resistance training, nothing to do with anything else, but you just have this group of people who went training for 10 weeks, and now he gets another person to write a paper on mental well-being following exercise. And a lot of the studies you're reading, or a massive amount of studies you're reading, aren't the studies that were initially designed when a group of people sat down in the room. A lot of it is this kind of post-hoc stuff where someone comes in afterwards and says, oh, can I look at your blood data for that? And let's see what happened over the course of that 24 weeks. Or can I just get that study group to go in once more and we'll do flexibility tests and see if their flexibility changed, or all these things. So there's a lot of post-hoc stuff that goes on that leads to kind of clunky stuff sometimes, or stuff that if you're not perceiving it correctly, or if you're not understanding it correctly, you could draw massive assumptions from. But maybe we don't always want to draw those massive assumptions.
And just on the other point of that as well, then a lot of times there's people who are fantastically well endowed with these areas that they're experts in, and you really should be paying attention to what they're saying. When you look at like a lot of the sports science stuff, a lot of the biochemistry stuff, there's some really amazing stuff out there that's beyond like these are some of the best physiologists in the world writing papers well beyond a master student who did fucking finance as their undergrad and did a master's in sports science in UL, and they're doing ground reactive forces and unweighted jumps or something, like there's, just because they're both publishing in like the Journal of Strength and Conditioning doesn't mean they're both in the same field of that, and it's there's a lot to it, I suppose. Anyway, moving on from that, because we
could spend all day at that. Jay Story, I think Jay might be one of your new one-to-ones, is he?
No.
He said, I don't know, he might be one of my new one-to-ones. Just got a coach on your recommendation. It's not us. Cost a fortune. So expect you to reimburse me if my total doesn't go up by 100 kilos.
Yeah, sure. Send us the
If you send us the invoice, we'll put it in the post. Dan Race says, any idea when this pants will be shipped? So a batch were shipped yesterday, another batch are being shipped today. There's a massive pile of envelopes and labels right next to me here, so they're all it's in the process.
You're on Top Chat again, you langer.
Oh my god,
absolute langer, you fucking langer. Catching snatch with my feet turned excessively out. It's just some weekend turn rotation hips. Any help appreciated. So this can be one of two things. A lot of times, this is ankle mobility. So people lack the ability to dorsiflex enough, but let their knees go over their toes. So what they end up doing then is turning the feet out as much as possible, and they actually have plenty of internal rotation or more internal rotation than their ability to dorsiflex. So their knees come in a lot at the bottom to compensate for this. We end up a lot of turned out. Knees can still go forward because of this ability to internally rotate. So in this scenario, it could be dorsiflexion, so ankle mobility, or it could be a lack of external rotation in the hips. So I'd look at both of these, and this could be for any number of reasons. It could be tight adductors, it could be lack of ability to externally rotate under load. So I'd look at external rotation hips and your ankles.
Okay.
Stand up paddleboard boarding, lads. Stand
up paddleboarding, stopping.
Stand up paddleboarding, lads. Stand up.
That's where he's watching this from. Are you watching the live stream while supping?
Stand up paddle. It's called supping.
That's what they call it, yeah.
Supping.
Yeah. Sup. My hair is so long. Okay, Owen B says, what causes an exaggerated donkey kick in the snatch? So a couple of things. A lot of the time what happens with donkey kicking is we get this positive feedback loop, and now suddenly it just becomes a thing over and over and over again. So you might have a coach say to you first day, or you might see someone being cued to move their feet, and moving your feet fast, you get this audible feedback of bang, my feet move fast, or bang, my feet move. This is a good thing. And what you get is, as the weights increase, you're looking for more of that positive feedback. You think a louder bang is better. So you get a louder, more audible bang each time. And that leads to us bringing our foot up higher and slamming our foot down into the ground. Now, it's not only audible feedback we get from a donkey kick, we also get a physical feedback. So when you slam your foot into the ground, same way if I slam my hands together here now, all the muscle will tense up in my leg, my hips and all that. So I get a strong catch position. So the more aggressive we are with our feet leads to better reactions and better catch positions and stronger catch positions. And also we understand that from that audible feedback, our feet have moved. And it's just a thing of we go beyond it. So if you imagine that pendulum is swinging when it's up here and you weren't moving your feet at all, you try and bring that pendulum back to the midline. Now you're moving your feet and it's audible and you have a strong catch position. Now you just move a small bit too far beyond it and you're donkey kicking. Now you have to move it back to the midline again. So it's just an overcorrection in one direction.
Maria's wondering, lever belt or neoprene belt for squats and training for weightlifting. So I would say stick with the tool you'll be using if you use them in full lifts. So never use a lever belt for the full lifts and weightlifting. They're too restrictive. In the clean, it doesn't really allow enough of that kind of to sit into that bottom position because there's too much extra kind of girth around the midline. So tapered leather belts with a prong are fine, or Velcro belts are perfectly fine as well, but never use a lever belt. You could use it for squats, but I think it's better you should use the same belt for both of them. And you do get some of that restriction in the bottom of the squats with that big thick lever belt when you want to be getting the most amount of depth for the best kind of upright position in weightlifting. So I would say neoprene or leather prong belt, but not lever belt. Shogun goes, John saying, hope you're well. John, no injury questions. John Caffrey.
Yeah.
Shogun, when do you think Weightlifting 2 program is going to be ready? It'll be released on Black Friday. On the sale.
Okay. N Casino Jack says, if you've been following Dylan Cooper's comeback, he's mentioned he doesn't back squat at all and has hit all-time PBs. Thoughts on doing this as a non-elite weightlifter with reserve strength? So 210 back squat, 175 front squat, and 125 clean and jerk. I haven't been following his comeback. Have you?
So I actually saw that video. So Dylan hit similar numbers he's done before, but at a lighter body weight. I'll be honest with you, this doesn't work. It doesn't work in the long run. It might work in the short run. The only reason it works for elite weightlifters is because you can front squat with enough frequency. And if you're taking enough drugs, you can hit enough numbers, and the drugs will make up the deficit for that force production we get from the higher back squats. Now, I'm not saying Dylan's taking gear or anything, but I'm just saying in those scenarios where we see like Xi Jiang or someone, or I think maybe it's Lydia Ain does the same as well. But even if you look at like the Kazakhs, who are super Bulgarian at the moment, they still do heavy back squats, not as frequency as their front squats, but having no back squats, bad idea, flat out. I would say that with the utmost confidence for anyone weightlifting. Yeah. No back squatting, terrible idea. I've tried it myself. I tried it for a few months, the start of 2021, just to see for like 3 months. And you can get super efficient with it. if you can maintain it, like for someone like Dylan, has already had a high level of strength before, he's getting back to those numbers. I would put money on it now that he is going to run into a wall in his clean and jerk at some stage. He's a high reservoir of strength at the moment. What I suspect is happening is like the front squats are keeping that, and this general training is bringing that force production close to where it used to be before. But I would bet at some stage in probably both of the lifts he's going to run into an issue unless he's taking a heap of gear. And if Dylan is taking a heap of gear, more power to him. And I hope he doesn't get caught. And it would be great because he's a very nice lifter. And I saw his 160 from blocks, I think. It was a very nice lift. It really wouldn't work, I don't think, for... I know it wouldn't work, actually. I'm going to say that for sure. It just wouldn't. It might work in the short run. It might even work for a peaking phase. But I'll tell you this. Recently, I had a lifter clean and jerking in the 150s, and he had no front squat sole for 2 months. And he was hitting PB clean and jerks and stuff, So I'd actually go as far as to say that you could just never front squat and weightlifting, and you'd still be better off with the back squat.
Just another shipping question. So with the shipping stuff, everything is being processed at the moment. We have stuff going out every single day. So
we ran into a minor software issues.
George Latter says, Dr. Demographic says that's the Nace Road. That is the Nace Road. A bad place to get caught speeding.
All the time
get caught there.
Touching wood.
George Latter says, any advice for someone about to get into BJJ? Cheers. A couple of things from me, and then I'll leave it to Garth. So the first thing is, just accept that you're going to be terrible at it for a long, long time. So don't go in there thinking that any training you've done will make you good at it. Just go in there with an open mind, understand you're going to be terrible at it, and that's part of the enjoyment of it is gaining that new skill. The second thing I'll say is that like a lot of new people get broken because they don't keep their strength training up. They don't look after themselves, and they'll just try and do a lot of rolling. You'll see everybody wearing knee braces and elbow braces and have sore shoulders or sore wrists. Just keep doing a nice, sensible amount of strength training. 2 days a week is plenty just to keep yourself tipping along and keep going with it. But they're my main two pieces of advice. My last piece of advice then would be get a journal, a training journal. And after every session, just sit in your car for 2 minutes, write out the stuff that was important that day. So it might be getting the underhook. You needed to focus on getting the underhook more. It might have been a particular aspect of a specific technique, or it might just have been calm down when you're passing guard or something. But write all those things out. That's invaluable.
I would say just be really humble and just listen to people. Even if you know someone's telling you something stupid after a while, just be like, okay, cool. And then just don't do it or something. But just listen to your professor. And be honestly, now the more you can do with jiu-jitsu, the better you'll get. And that's the same with every sport. So I would say within the realms of being smart, do as much as you can do. And as consistent, be super consistent. That's really important. Consistency, a lot of times, big thing in jiu-jitsu, and you'll see it all over the band where people do it for a few months and they give up for a few months and do a few months and they give up for a few months. No. You have to be consistent with it. It's a big thing. The World Cup, I assume he means the Rugby World Cup.
Absolutely, yeah.
No
it's
idea.
Ireland.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
They're not going to win it. Like they should win it. They should. They're the best team in the world right now. 100%.
They should win it, yeah.
But they're not. We know they're not going to win it. It's either going to be England, New Zealand.
It won't be England.
Or
it won't be England. The All Blacks shit the bed every time. It's going to be France.
I don't think France.
South Africa or Ireland. It will be France, South Africa.
I don't know. I don't know about France.
Wait, what do you think about
Ireland
France?
Could win it, but they're not going to. They're this. You think New Zealand shit the bed? Fucking Ireland just.
No.
It was in Japan, like.
No.
What's that about?
No.
They thought they were playing Aussie rules, like.
No. The All Blacks will shit the bed. It'll be France, Ireland, or South Africa. I think France. So France have the ability and have had the ability for the last 20 years to beat every single team in the world on a good day. And the problem is they're just not consistent.
Because they're French.
That's 100% the reason why. It's because they're French. And just that culture of Joe will rebel and will push back against people, and they don't ever have this kind of long-term development because something goes wrong and everything gets thrown out and everything's useless and everything's shite, and then they have exactly they have a brand new team the next year, you know, but it'll be one of those 3 teams.
George said, cheers. All right, friends. Opinion Candido's novice program. Never seen it, but
Sika basic strength training program. That's where it's at.
Highlights. What is Sika Weightlifting 2.0? Is it going to be a 12-week program? Is it sequel to beginner program? Should it be run before the weightlifting blocks or after? So this is the kind of evolution of our weightlifting programs for the non-beginner. So it's a program that is based upon the feedback we get from people, what people are doing, and the progress we see people making, how people structure trainings, and the realities of how people interact with training in their kind of everyday life. So there's a couple of reasons we're doing Weightlifting 2.0 in 12-week blocks. So first of all, it's hard for people to plan long-term for their weightlifting, where they will be able to do, when we the sequence of weightlifting blocks at the moment, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, where we envision people following these as consistently as possible throughout the year. But in reality, it's quite difficult for people to get these long-term training blocks done in a row without encountering stuff with work, life, illness, holidays, injury, all these different things, And so the 12-week blocks are confined in these 12 weeks. There will be sequential when you buy them. So it'll be weightlifting block 1, block 2, but these will be 12-week blocks, and they'll start and peak in the same block. So you'll be able to plan your training, and you'll know, okay, so I've got, several weeks in length here where I know I need to be on the money, where I need to be set up with my training, where I need to kind of get these 12 weeks in line, and then I can peak in this, and then I can assess where I'm at with my training after, and then I can decide if I want to do a prep phase or if I want to do a maintenance phase for a while, or do I know I have another 12 weeks of training where I can go into my next block. So it's kind of a response to that. It's changing some of the loading on some of the things in relation to a little bit of squatting. So the squatting and stuff will be kind of confined to this 12-week block, and then changing again for the next 12-week block when you're doing it. Now, we don't want to force people to buy 12 weeks in a row as well, so we'll be selling them in part 1 and part 2. So you'll be able to buy the first 6 weeks of block 1, so then you'll get the other half then when you come into it, because obviously some people might be able to afford the full price in one go, which is why the blocks were originally sold as in 4-week sections, because we wanted a more cost-effective alternative for when we're coaching people, so they're on the group and they can consistently get some coaching from us and get good programming and do consistently each month. That's not very expensive, so we're going to keep this the same way, but we also want to still have it work in a structured manner. When people buy the program, they have what suits them better. It's a good balance between what we know people need to do to get better, but what is realistic for people to do in their training, and what's kind of the most effective product for them. Because in the day, it is a product. We want to make sure it's the best thing for people. So it's just kind of an evolution of seeing thousands of weightlifters, I suppose, do the original weightlifting programs, and what is like the next kind of evolution of that.
JSEM94 says, tuning in from Sweden. Hello from Ireland. I've been ill for about a week and a half now, and it sucks. My question has to do with it. So how does one manage illness inside a training block? So the first thing is, it really depends on what the illness is. It really depends on how severe the illness is, and what kind of training you're doing, right? So a very, very good piece of advice I got when I was probably 14 or 15 from my GP, anything to do with the upper respiratory tract. So any cold, flu, sore throat, nasal infection, anything to do with the upper nasal tract, you limit the amount of cardiovascular work you do almost 100%. So no increased rate of breathing, nothing that's going to open those lower sacs in your lungs, nothing that's going to tax your cardiovascular system. You leave it alone. So in that case, then you could do some very rudimentary strength training exercises. You could do some calisthenics. But if you're increasing your heart rate, or you're really getting out of breath at any point, you don't want to do it. That's for upper respiratory tract infections. For other kind of things, the recovery protocols are different and the training protocols are different. But generally what we would say is, if you've been out of training for a week, you regress a full week of your program. If you're out of training 2 weeks, you regress 2 full weeks of your program. And then if it's any longer than 2 weeks out of training, you restart the training block. So at least a month back, right? So it's difficult. The last thing I would say on this is that the longer you keep trying to train or getting some sort of training in or going to the gym or doing small, but the longer you keep at that kind of stuff, the longer you're going to prolong your recovery from illness. So it's not like you should be trying to stay in some kind of, oh, I'll just hop on the bike for a small bit every day, or I'll do a small bit of training, or I'll see how much training I can do. If you just stopped completely, did as much bed rest as you possibly could, just stayed as sedentary as you possibly can and allow yourself to recover, you'll recover a hell of a lot faster than trying to keep training or trying to keep going with it.
Do
you want to pick a few questions?
Yeah.
Okay, OM says, and just because you're the next question there, how would you go about programming for an intermediate conventional deadlifter wanting to try out sumo deadlifting? Just keep going with your normal conventional training, and then 1 or 2 days a week at the end of a session, just start moving around barbell with around 40% of your 1 rep max in it. Try and do kind of 20 good singles or doubles at very, very light weights. Start really refining that technique. Don't ever use it as a training exercise, but you're just practicing the skill. That's 30 or 40% of 1RM. It's perfect for that. A lot of singles, a lot of doubles, a lot of triples. Make sure you're videoing everything. Make sure you get the positions perfect. And then after you've learned the skill and you've acquired the positions needed to do it, and you can do it at light weights, then you can start slowly building up, putting some weight on the bar and seeing if you need any specific work, like specific postural strength stuff, specific, like whatever it might be, external rotation work in your hips. Because the first thing you need to do is just learn the skill and how to do it.
Batman, what are your best numbers? So 155 snatch, 190 clean and jerk, 290 squat with no belt. Deadlift, I have no idea. Maybe I did 280 like 6 years ago. I'm sure it's
280 now.
I have no idea what I could have done with my best. Best bench is 125, I want to say. Best strict press is 120, which is a normal ratio. Best snatch grip deadlift for the hook grip is 220. Best push press is 160. Snatch grip power jerk 200 kilos.
That's the most impressive.
That's probably the most impressive one, yeah. Fucking 270 by 5 sumo deadlift or something after doing it for 4 days. What, Matt? One of yours?
Snatch 125. Clean and jerked 155. Clean 160. Squatted 230. Deadlifted 250. Bench press 140. What are the numbers out there?
What's your front squat? 210?
200.
Oh, 200.
Front squat 200.
My front squat at 240 as well.
Hex bar deadlifted 283 kilos in a scientific study.
Do you think I can bench 140 by Christmas?
No.
I haven't benched in 6 years, I'd say. Maybe one of the last super total. I bet I could bench one. Could I bench 140 Christmas without tearing a pec is the real question.
You'd literally be like this. If you weren't weightlifting now, you could definitely do it.
But I'm barely weightlifting now.
I'd love to great for jiu-jitsu.
Oh my god. I bet I could bench 140 by Christmas.
I think everyone needs to be able to bench 140.
I feel like that as well, you see.
I think it's like the one thing you can't do.
No, I'm really good at benching.
But you've never been. You can't say you're really good at benching. You've bench press with a 12-year-old girl. I'm really good at benching, but I bench 120.
I guarantee you. Do you act honestly? No. I know this bit of
140 by Christmas.
Bit of hubris for the podcast. In reality, you know I could probably bench. I bet I could bench 200 kilos in like 2 years if I went after it.
But that's worthless.
200 kilos, I know. Why would I do that?
No, it's worthless you saying that because you'll never do it.
Yeah, I don't care. Like,
do you think you could do 140 by Christmas?
I think I could do 140 by Christmas.
Do the people watching this live stream think you could do it? I don't think anyone thinks you could do it. Because they know you'll just give up because your shoulders get sore or there'll be
Do you think I care what they think of what I think I can do?
Yeah.
I don't.
You do. Willie says, I think Big Homie can knock out 140. Will the president of Sika do a world tour like the Pope? Yes.
Thoughts on focusing on Anderson bottom-up squats instead of full back squats for a month or two? Nah, it's not a good idea. You'll just lose that kind of familiarity with the timing, the positions at the bottom. because you won't be in that kind of frictionless bottom position. You'll have the supported pins at the bottom. They're a useful exercise in some scenarios for athletes in season. Maybe just do lighter squats is kind of what we prefer to do, but they can be useful sometimes. They might be useful in a scenario if you're going from like bottom up squat, like a concentric only squat, into like a jump or something if you're looking for like plyometric PAP. But you could just do a normal squat as well, because a lot of literature is supported by that. But I wouldn't be super as an addition to your training. Maybe they would be useful as a variation in front squats. If you had a lot of issue with upper back rounding and you were doing plenty of back squatting and stuff, and you wanted to change a little bit of the front squats, or you want to do as an accessory to your back squat where you want to just practice the position a little bit more, they could be very useful in that position if you're at the very rock bottom of your front squat. But I wouldn't remove all your squats and just do your bottom up squats. Do we ever feel disdain for the amount of paid use in strength sports? I think it's as cool as spectator, but it sucks as competitors personally. No, I wonder, have I just been so indoctrinated? Because when I started, weightlifting was in its heyday and everyone just knew how it was. So I just kind of accepted it. So maybe, am I as a result of my culture? I don't know. As a result of culture we're in.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I don't have disdain for it.
I definitely don't have disdain for it. The thing for me is it's more to do with how I view myself, or how I think athletes should view themselves when they look at strength sports. Strength sports are unlike almost anything else because they're unbelievably objective. I can compare my 140 bench press that I can do to Gerf's 140 bench press that he can't do. I can compare his 290 squat to my 230 squat, and they're utterly comparable at every point. If I meet anybody in a different country, tell them my numbers, they understand exactly how strong I am, and it's perfect comparison across all groups. If you understand their 1RM numbers and their body weight, you know how strong they are, what capacity they have. That doesn't exist in other sports, because most of the time you're playing a team sport, or there's a skill and physical component to it, or there's multiple components, so you can't really categorize how good someone is. And then I think people view themselves as, oh, I should be as good as X or as good as Y, or I've trained for the same amount as Owen, so I should have the same numbers as Owen. And then people have this additional variable in there where they say, oh, whoever, Klokov takes gear and I don't take gear. So I wish I could compare myself to him. Or Ilya Ilin was only good in comparison to other geared lifters and not in comparison to clean lifters. And I think that's the bigger issue here in total. It's why people get jaded. It's because they view themselves as in somehow needing to be comparable to other people. Most of us do strength sports because we enjoy being stronger. We enjoy being a stronger version of ourselves, and you don't really need to compare your numbers to anyone else. You just need to compare your numbers to what you were previously. And if you keep that in mind,
what if you're
better?
Yeah,
I know. I was literally just thinking.
What if he was way better 10 years ago? Now he's like, fuck.
Oh shit! I keep getting worse. But no, I think a lot of people will be a lot less jaded if they were kind of looking intrinsically rather than extrinsically, and they just spent a little less time kind of looking at what the other 22-year-old on Instagram does, or what another person of similar ilk does to them.
Let's go to Flyfit tomorrow and start the Road to 140 series.
I'm going to Flyfit in the morning.
What time are you going?
I don't know, because our buddy wants to go at like 7 a.m.
Who?
Din.
Don't mind that. I can't go that early.
He laughed at me when I said let's train at 8. He laughed.
Lunchtime.
And he said,
I can't go that early.
Medical students are mental.
People without children just don't understand. Thanks
my God. I don't have kids. What are you on about?
Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you later.
Yes.